All right, in this presentation, I'm going to show you how to recode and compute new variables in SPSS, which can be useful for a lot of analyses, but particularly helpful when you're interested in doing subgroup comparisons. All right, let's start off with this idea of computing a variable. So when or why would you want to even do that? So first of all, maybe you'd like to add two variables together. Oftentimes in education, we'll add together test scores. So perhaps you want to look at students' overall test scores, and we have their English scores and their math scores. So let's compute what their overall test scores are. I'll show you how to do that right now in SPSS. All right, so here is our data view. And like I said, maybe we want cumulative test score. So we want to add together these two variables, English test and math test. So how do we do that? Go up here to our transform menu, and the first option here, compute variable. Very easy. So first we go down here and find I'll start with first, what SPSS is going to do is create a new variable, and that's what it calls the target variable. So we have to give our target variable a name. So maybe we'll call it cumulative underscore test. And remember that you can't use spaces or sort of certain characters aren't allowed here, but you can do the underscore. So I'm calling it cumulative underscore test. And if you go up here to type and label, you can actually tell it to populate that label column, but you can always just go in and type yourself. But I'll do it here. Cumulative test score. And oftentimes I like to include in the label how I actually computed it as a reminder to myself. So English plus math. So okay, continue, and oops, I should have said, you could have it create a string variable from this, but of course we want it to be numeric. So I'm not going to change that there. Continue. All right, so now this is basically like a little math problem. Now we tell SPSS how we want that variable to be computed. I want it to be English test score, so I come over here, I select English, and then I want English test plus, got our little calculator here, and then math test. So very simple. So you can do, of course, like more complex operations, all kinds of special functions, whatever. But just getting in here, the basic way to compute a new variable, name of the new variable, then the expression for what you want, and then hit OK. And so what happens is SPSS doesn't pull up an output window, but look, you can see here, we've got a new variable here. So here is our cumulative test variable that it ran. And if we wanted to just to confirm that our variable exists and looks good, obviously we could go to our data view and we can see over here that there's values here that look pretty reasonable, but we could come back and say, let's just double check and let's see here, descriptive statistics. Let's see what our new variable looks like, and actually let's compare it to math and English score too. So I'm going to look at the descriptors here for all of my 3 new variables, and that will pull up the output view. And so we can see here, oh yeah, this makes sense. Here's English, here's math, and then here's our cumulative. So good, it makes sense that, overall that these numbers look pretty reasonable. It should definitely be higher than both English and math, sort of higher means, etc. So that's sort of the basic approach to computing a new variable in SPSS. Another example, at least in education, when we use the compute command, is to calculate the average or the mean of several variables. So for example, in our data set, we have 2 individual semester GPAs, but wait, maybe we want to calculate the cumulative GPA, so the average or the grand mean of each of the individual semester GPAs. So we would go to SPSS, and just to confirm, here's last semester, current semester GPA, and like I said, we're going to try to compute and create a new variable that represents cumulative GPA. So we come up here to our compute variable. Let's say we're going to call it cumulative underscore GPA, and then again, we'll go to our label. We'll create our label right now. cumulative GPA, last plus current. Again, this is just as a reminder to myself. When I come back to my data set, like in a month or something, I can remember what that was. All right. So here's last. Oh, actually, you know what? I lied there on my label. It's not last current, it's average of last plus current, right? Cumulative GPA would be the average of last semester plus current. So what we need to do is calculate the average. So last semester plus current semester, that one over there. And then we, of course, need to tell it to take the average. So last current divided by 2. And so GPA, there we hit OK. Dun, dun, dun. Here is our new cumulative GPA. And as we can see here, the label, oops, I kind of made that a little bit too crazy of a view. But as I was trying to show you, the label of this new variable, let me kind of get my label back over here. The label is cumulative GPA average of last semester plus current semester. Maybe if I wanted to come in here and change, you know what, you can just type over this average, maybe AVG, last and current or something like that. I don't know. But it's always important, again, in terms of from a data management perspective, to keep your label, use your labels to help you, remind you of what your different measures are. So there we go. And in this case, I would also save my data set here. I would save your data set, because if you don't save it, then close your data set. Oops, I'm not going to save it right here, but make sure to save it, because otherwise if you close it without saving, those new variables you've created will not be there when you reopen your data set. So important to do that. So that's another use of the compute command. I'll give you a third example of how we often use it in education now. Okay, so this final commonly used sort of variable computation that we're often used in, at least in education research, is a little bit different. It's actually called a variable transformation, but it creates a new variable. So I'm including it in sort of this discussion here. So a lot of times, or sometimes at least, you'll want to standardize your continuous variables, which is also called creating z-scores, which essentially, the reason for doing this allows you to compare the effects or the relative impact of different continuous variables that are originally measured on different scales. It's called standardizing your scale, and I'll show you what this looks like right now. We'll use, let's say, GPA and English scores as an example of z-scoring. So the idea is that by doing this computation or this transformation, we are going to make new variables that represent GPA and English scores, but each one will be on the same scale where the mean is equal to 0 and the standard deviation equal to 1. And we do this not through the compute command. SPSS, for whatever reason, the programmers have it through the descriptives menu. So let me show you how to do that now. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's try to standardize cumulative GPA and English test score. So to do that, we're going to come up to, not the transform menu for this one, but analyze, and then we're going to go to descriptive statistics and descriptives. So here's our descriptive dialog box, and what you do is you select the variables you want to standardize. So in this case, I want to do, as I said, both cumulative GPA and test score, and then all you do is click here, save standardized values as variables, and then you hit OK. And so this will produce a descriptive results, the descriptive results of your original variables, cumulative GPA and English test score. So let's shrink this down. But look, SPSS has also created two new variables, Z cumulative GPA and Z English test, and it tells you, it labeled it already for you. These are the Z scores of both of those variables. Let's see now let's look at the descriptive statistics for these new variables. So it didn't give us the output for whatever reason. They don't give you the new variable descriptive statistics until you ask for them. So coming over here, now we have these two new variables, the z-scores, and let's look and compare what those descriptives look like. Okay, so as I said here, the idea of standardizing variables is to have them on a common scale where the mean is equal to 0 and the standard deviation 1. So as we can see, English test score, if we were just using the raw variable for English test score, the mean was 70. And for GPA, it was 2.99. So if we wanted to do some more sophisticated analyses and compare sort of the relative results of an analysis looking at GPA to English test score, it's hard to compare them because they're both on different scales. That's when standardizing or doing a z-score comes in handy. So you can standardize, again, for continuous variables only. It doesn't work for categorical variables, but it's a useful and analytic strategy to help kind of with more sophisticated analyses and comparisons. And that's just how you do it. You just do it through the descriptives menu. So that's kind of a special case of a computation. But the rest, if you want to do sort of the more traditional computations, again, that's through transform compute variable. But z-scores are an exception. And it's a useful little, again, as I said, a useful little skill to have in analyses, especially when we get to running regressions, which will be coming up soon in this class. Okay, in addition to computing and transforming variables, sometimes you want to recode variables. One example would be if you want to create groups from a continuous variable, like maybe you know that your average GPA is 2.99 and you'd like to create two groups, students with GPAs below the average and then above the average. So that would be, again, using your continuous variable to create groups. Or maybe you can combine groups already existing in a categorical variable and make them even smaller. So maybe you wanted to do an analysis that grouped first and second year students together and then third and fourth year students together. Both of these would involve creating new variables by recoding existing ones. And I'm going to show you how to do that in SPSS right now. Okay, so first let's do the example about recoding a continuous variable into a categorical one. So maybe use GPA current term. And so let's decide on what our cut point is by looking at reminding ourselves what our statistics are and what I don't know why my computer being so crazy. Descriptive statistics, descriptives. Let's look at, I think mean was 2.99. Let's, no, 3.005. Okay, so let's say I want to create a measure of students that have GPA, or a new variable that has two categories, students with that are at or above 3.005 or below 3.005. So up here is in the transform menu option, transform record different variables. I always do this because I like creating new variables and preserving my original variables always, just in case I want to go back to my original ones and use them again in their original form. So I always do recode into different variables. So we go up here. And so, all right, so first of all, what we want to tell SPSS is the variable we want to recode. So GPA current semester, right? So it adds it here. It's like, okay, let's go down here and tell it exactly what you want the new variable to include. So okay, our old value. So again, I want to have two categories, one with the mean GPA through the highest. So my mean GPA, 0.05, right? Range, value highest. I'm basically telling it one category of my new variable to be average GPA through highest GPA, old value, right? New variable, in my new variable, I want those to all be the value of 1. So anybody that has a value of 1 in my new variable will have the average GPA, whatever, okay? So I'm going to add that here to variable, but of course there's still else. I need to say, right, the rate is 2.5 or 3.05, but actually it's much easier just to be like all other values. So I shouldn't have done that. because I screwed up here. So all other values in my data set that's below 3.005, I want SPSS to give a value of 0 to. I accidentally in there. We don't want that because then they're in the same category as everybody with the high GPA. So then we say, so we're giving this command for us to assign anyone who had a GPA of 5 or higher, value of 1. Otherwise, everybody else, lower values, 0. One of these two it can be really nice also to use this recode command to look at missing data. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you can say, hey, for anybody who is missing data on GPA, we want every who we give a value of 0 to, and we can look kind of and use that to analyze whether or not data are significantly missing on different variables. But I'm going off on a tangent here. Right now, we just want to recode cumulative GPA to a dummy variable where above average get a value of 1 and everybody below gets 0. So we're going to hit continue here. And okay, oops, it's because I did that. Okay. It was, it thought I was trying to do something else. I have this saying no, so continue. Okay, so old new values, but now we tell SPSS what we want our new variable to be called. I'm going to call it GPA current and then dummy because we cut it at the mean. So I'll type in the label when we get there, but okay, so that is that. And so we hit change here. Now instead of GPA current question mark, we want GPA current to be recoded into current dummy using, again, this little in our values menu box. All right, so let's hit OK. Okay, so it's giving us the descriptive statistics for the original variable. Let's come back here. Look, we have a new variable that has been created because we have not yet asked for that descriptive statistics yet, but good practice is, of course, to label your new variable here. So this is, we know our values of, what did I say here? Value of 0 is below average GPA. And then I'm going to say the value of 1, right, is average GPA or above, right? So it's important to keep your data very updated. So then again, when you come back in like a couple of weeks or something, you'll remember what you did. Computed dummy variable, I'm putting in my description from current GPA above average or above. Okay, so I'm doing that just because that's what I decided to label it. All right, so let's check and see whether or not SPSS actually did a good job on this and what our new variable looks like. So we can go up here to analyze, and since I do a little cost tab, descriptive statistics helpful for dummies. Okay, here I want my computed dummy actually I wanted to do a frequency table. I'm sorry. Analyze statistics, where C, selected, there it is. Frequency table, and then we're going to go down here and find our new dummy variable, computed dummy. Could do an APA style table, but we're not gonna. All right, let's see here. Okay, great. So here is our new dummy variable that we just created from current GPA. The data set about 492 students had below our average, and 8 had GPAs at or above the average, which makes sense, right? Because average is usually like in the middle of a data set. So this is good. Well, it doesn't always have to be a cut point in the middle of a data set, but this makes sense based on what I know about the data set because I created it. So yes, so here that is one to use the recode command. So again, transform, recode into different variables. Always do option is my recommendation. Okay, so let's do a final example using the recode menus to, this time, instead of looking at this variable like GPA to create different groups, let's do combine groups that are in a categorical variable. For instance, class year. We'll use that as an example. Okay, so class year. So as you know, we have values 3 and 4. Let's say I want to create a variable that just represents second students and put everybody else in their own category. So let's do a dummy variable where second year students are a value of 1 and everybody else is a value of 0. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so transform into different variables. Class year is our variable of interest, our input variable. As I said, I want any second year students who have a value, I want them to have a value of 1 in my, let's add to code from 2 into 1. And then, oops, I could do all of values equals 0, or I could manually wait and say anybody who's a first year student, I want them to have a value of 0 in my new data set. As well, I want third year students who had a value in my old data set to have a value of 0 in my data set, and then the same for fourth year students. I'm doing this kind of in a tedious way, but just to show you, you can pretty much, you could do manual any you wanted from your old. So those are all of my categories. So I'm going to hit continue. And then just last time, we need to also tell SPSS what we want our output variable to be. So I'm going to call it second year students. Because and I'll label it second year students compared to everyone else, or I don't know, that's gonna be my label, but second year students because, right, I assigned them to the main category and then everybody else is part of the reference group. So I want to label my variable in a way that reminds me of that. And so I'm going to tell SPSS now change, right? So this change to change this question mark here, tell it what variable to be. So from year study into a new variable called second. Okay, here it is. And let's just do a quick frequency table. Check out our new variable of second year students. Oops, we have to reset. Still have my other one, second year students. Ta-ta, and hit OK. Let's see here. Fabulous. So this looks pretty good. Actually, really double check ourselves. We could go back and look at our original variable, right? So analyze statistics. That's my computer getting overwhelmed by SPSS today. So we could go back. Let's look at class year. So here, come on. You can do it. You can do it. Don't freeze. All right. Should have put that one in there too, because that can, we can double check our original 255 second year students, for second year students to be the value of 1, so 255. So it worked out correctly. And this reminds me, oh, I would like to have this on my values here. So I'm gonna come back here to my data. As opposed to no values, I'm gonna come in here and assign a value of 1, 2, and then label it as second year students. And then I'm going to remind myself that everybody else, first, third, fourth year students. All right, okay. And so now I've got those variable labels here. And if I rerun my frequency, then it will display properly. Where's our new variable? Second, okay. And so as you see here, our variables right there, than just having the ones, which I done initially because I come back to our data set to remember exactly what each of these variables mean. So that is kind of a basic overview of how to use the compute as well as the recode commands in SPSS.